Vanessa, you on the spot.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Welcome to everybody. And just to start by saying thanks for your time. I know this is a short week for everyone, so we really, thanks that you managed to fit this in to join us today. IPSA's primary aim is to promote professionalism across the packaging industry, which certainly all our members know. And a key part of doing this is through sharing knowledge and stimulating conversations around topical issues that are impacting the South African packaging industry. And that's really what today is all about. This is the first in a series of knowledge share initiatives, which IPSA is planning to host this year. So thank you for joining us for this one. A little bit of housekeeping. The webinar is going to run until 2:30. That's the time we booked for it. Kishan's going to briefly introduce IPSA, especially to those delegates that aren't members and don't know about IPSA. And then Nkosinathi will introduce Able Energy, and we'll introduce our speaker for today, Greg, who will take it from there. As Kishan has said, the session is being recorded, and we'll share that as needed afterwards. And then please, as we go through and as Greg's speaking, questions may pop up in your mind. Before you lose them, type them into the chat section, and we're going to keep track of those. We've allocated some question and answer time at the end. So we'll go through at that point whatever's in that chat section, but we'll also open the floor. And to do that, we also ask if you'll just raise a hand with the little reaction button so that we know to come to you and address your question. So without taking any more time, let me hand over to Kisha.
Okay, thanks, Vanessa. And just to reiterate Vanessa's welcome, I'm really honored and privileged to be amongst all of you and to represent the Institute of Packaging South Africa. By the way, IPSA is 53 years old this year. We were born in 1970, and as a result of very visionary people at the time. And if you recall, at the time, the packaging industry was really, in the 70s, it was really beginning to formalize from what I would consider to be very rudimentary, packaging manufacturing opportunities to more organized systems of packaging. We had the colas and in the 80s, the colas and the Nampaks started to form, all amalgamated packaging industries. But essentially, packaging in its current formal format is what the Packaging Institute of Packaging represents. It represents basically members across the converters and the brand owners in South Africa. I would say that the Institute of Packaging, one of its greatest bouquets of offerings is the education bouquet, which is a system of packaging learning starting from the OPT, which is the overview of packaging technology, then the one-year diploma, then the advanced, and then the certified packaging professional. I can speak more to you about that one-on-one, but I'll just leave it here. And then, of course, I think another great packaging contribution is the Gold Pack Awards that's run by the Institute of Packaging South Africa, specifically run by Mr. Bill Marshall, who is here. Thank you, Bill. And again, this is rated internationally as an absolutely, how shall I put it, as a leading packaging recognition or awards program. Of course, it is endorsed also by WPO. Incidentally, the Institute of Packaging South Africa is also a member of WPO, and all of its training programs are endorsed by WPO as well. So, as Vanessa has said, this is really one of many forthcoming learning opportunities that IPSA is offering members as its value add. And with that, I'm going to ask our partners, who is Able Energy, to just introduce themselves. So, Nkosinathi.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Kishan. And thank you to all the attendees that have made it to today's webinar. Well, a brief introduction to Able Energy. We are an energy management company that broadly focuses on electrical energy efficiency and utilities optimization strategies. The energy efficiency improvement measures that we offer are for commercial and industrial facilities, whether they are rented or owned, with a principal objective to assist in optimizing energy usage for purposes of managing the associated costs. Our primary objective as a company is to help or assist manage energy consumption and operational utility costs in industrial and commercial facilities in order to realize financial savings, growth of asset values, and market differentiation improvements for one's property portfolio. And we have a number of clients. Maybe the most prominent one will be like your Toyotas, your Vugile Property Funds, and your Rhodes Foods Group. And as an introduction, maybe to our speaker, Greg, my colleague. Greg has over 30 years research and professional consulting experience in both general and specialized consulting, power systems, and grids, covering embedded and real-time energy management, measurement and verification, HVAC and hot water thermal storage systems, large-scale electrical metering systems, variable speed drives, electrical vehicles and dashboard reporting systems and analytics, variable speed drives as well. I think it was repeated twice. And then building a renewable energy management system, an integrated business information and advanced data visualization analytics, and has over like 40 years publication and articles on renewable energy management and systems. And maybe as a few success stories that I would like to share with you. He has supported the University of KwaZulu-Natal to manage over 150 million, to make over 150 million in energy savings, and supported the Durban Water Waste Division of the eThekwini municipality in conjunction with the CSIR and UNIDO to achieve a 12% energy reduction for one of their water metering, wastewater treatment plants, for which they recently won an award. He has also worked with eThekwini Energy Office in compiling WEDSM proposal and technical assessments for energy projects and report. He's also supported the USAID South African Led Program to provide technical assistance and support for the municipalities for the energy management, demand side management applications, and energy audits for buildings, wastewater treatment, freshwater treatment plants in terms of real-time and historical web-based operational and management dashboard metering systems. And lastly, he has achieved savings, energy and tariff optimization or analysis for operational cost savings for large businesses for over 20 years. So that being said, I would like to hand it over to Greg to run us through the presentation.
Greg, you'll be able to share now, and you unmute. You've got your next slide coming through, Greg. You need to get it to presentation mode. That's perfect. You unmute, huh? Greg, you're muted.
Sorry, everybody. Yes, thank you for the generous introductions, and good afternoon to everybody. And hopefully today we can cover some of the high-level aspects pertaining to energy management. Based on the small survey that was conducted, it's quite clear that a lot of people do energy management in one form or another. But what we've generally found is lacking is that how that is done in context of the broader pictures of standards and quality assurance and all that type of stuff. Just like today, we've chosen the title of Just Energy Transition. And, where do all these things that you do on the shop floor up to management and so on, how do these all fit in and in what context? Especially like the work that Kishan is doing, how do these all fit in? So that's basically what today is, or the objective is today, is to say, well, there's this just energy transition, there's standards, there's quality assurance, there's a whole lot of things. How's the day-to-day stuff that we do? How does this all fit into the picture? So if we move on to this just energy transition, I'm sure many of you have heard this buzzword, and based on the feedback that we got from the survey, some people have heard about it, some people haven't. But on the top right-hand side here, basically sums it up is really a transition from fossil fuel energy to green energy. What is green energy? Anything that replaces fossil fuel, so renewable energy, photovoltaics, solar and stuff like that. And if you have a look here in the very broad aspects, the energy transition can mean different things to different entities. So if you're talking about government, you'll see that it's a transition from coal to renewable energies, but you don't want to have or entail massive job losses. So that's where the whole just issue comes in the just transition. But when you take that down to a sort of medium, smaller type enterprise, it's those types of things are not as critical. So for many businesses like yourself, it's mostly what affects the bottom line, what is the impact of your company in terms of its brand and stuff like that. So there's these four aspects here, which is the decarbonization, which is, of course, moving to renewable energies. The digitalization is really saying, well, we're now going to measure, use meters, use sensors, collect that information so that we can monitor and measure. The decentralization is basically saying, well, typically in South Africa, we've relied on Eskom as our sole generation entity, and we're now going to start putting in our own solar PV generators and stuff like that. And so we're going to decentralize the power as it now stands, mostly from an operational point of view. If you have an unreliable power supply, people are in the packaging industry, you can't have your business up and down and on and off because, never mind about the decarbonization, it's job losses, it's profit loss, turnover and so on. And then the deregulation, of course, comes about that to achieve this decentralization down here, you're going to have to make sure that government amends the Electricity Act. And we've seen with the Department of Minerals and Energy, where they're now allowing people to co-generate and self-generate. And there's a whole lot of rules and regulations that come along, because it's not just about adding a megawatt of solar plant onto your building. It's if you're pushing that back into the electricity distribution system, you have to worry about how it feeds into the system, how it causes spurious trippings, and so on. So in assuming this decentralization responsibility as a company, the deregulation, you have to make sure that it's not just a bottom line money issue, but you've got to keep the system and the people around you up and running as well. So we've had cases here in Durban where on the weekends when solar feeds into the system, it causes tripping, and businesses around the other side or along the same feeder get cut off, basically because no one thought about protection, and that power was flowing in the other direction, and the protection instruments can't pick that up. So these are all nitty-gritty things. And what you want to find out is, okay, well, we all know we want to move from fossil to green. We want to achieve these things within the context of our own sector, our own business. And then we'll move to the next slide. And essentially, to achieve that, businesses are going to have to look at these 5 key strategic areas. One is your policy and institutions. Of course, as a small business or medium-sized business, you know, a lot of people don't have policies. They just meet around the table and they have an informal policy and understanding. This training and capacity building, that's always an aspect of it. And if you putting in these renewable energy things, you have to have people who know how they run, know how they operate. And many of you who might have gone into renewable energy photovoltaics, you suddenly left with a system which nobody knows how to run and operate, and there's no manuals, nobody knows how to set protection, and you start landing up with more problems than you thought, or things that you just didn't think about. And that's why the policy and institutions and training and capacity in making this transition are quite important. And then, of course, the social dialogue and collaboration is, yes, you have this, you're achieving things, how are you affecting businesses and people around you? And then that will require the awareness raising, both within your own company and with companies around you that are going to be affected. If you're pushing power back into the system, you're now like Eskom, you're now like the municipality. You're going to have to take responsibility. If you push power back into the system and you trip someone's business a kilometer away down the line, you're going to take responsibility for that. So all these things have to be put in place. And then, of course, there's the financing aspect. And I noticed from the survey that some people have already gone into funding their own projects, but there's quite a bit of external funding as part of this whole just transition. You hear government talking about the billions that it's raised. So there is money available, but the point is how do you gain access to that? And what do you have to do that? It's like the bank. If the bank, you want to get a loan from the bank or from somebody, they want to see the color of your underpants. So in exactly the same way here, if you want to access these incentives and so on, government incentive, you have to understand the financing. And that's where all these things start to play a role, and you know, to achieve this just transition. So it can be a just transition, or it can be just a transition, and that depends on the take of the individual. All right, then, as I said, when one does energy management in any organization, and it depends whether it's small to large, whether it's part of the brand or whether it's part of operations, there's always a context. And you hear people, and Kishan, this is his particular area, and I'm just showing you at a high level system here. There's many types of systems. There's environmental management, safety, food, information, compliance management. There's all these systems that sit together, and there's also an energy management system. All right, so these are standards, all right, which you must implement these particular aspects, and it sets out a standard for doing that. And then this here, the IMS stands for an integrated management system. Is this, if you're an organization which has all these aspects in place, then you're going to have a quality management system which ensures that you apply it consistently over all your different systems. So if you've got these things in your organization, how do you maintain them? How do you organize that? So when you apply for funding, when you looking at getting funding for projects and stuff like that, you can have confidence or go in with confidence to say to people, well, you know, this is the context within which these type of applications are using. So you can do energy management every day, and if you don't document it and you don't follow up and know what it's doing, how are you going to try and explain that to your board, to your energy management committee, or to funders? So that's why these systems come about, and that's the role of that. So I thought I'd give a high-level overview just to show that, you know, an energy management system standard is only part of a whole lot of other things. It's just one aspect. Now, if we look at energy management in a broad context, there's normally three levels. You know, one is at the enterprise level, one is at operations, and one is control. So, to a lot of people, you might be operating down here at the coalface, where you're looking at the particular information. You've got to look after that information. You will attach sensors, meters, and so on to it, and you will pull information up into operations. So you might have packaging systems down here, and up top you've got a process control, which looks at the flow through the system, and you will have your operators here. And then, of course, on the operations side, you might have your business in Johannesburg, you might have it in Cape Town, it might be all over the place, and you might have 10 of these and 10 of these, and then you've got to pull all that information together, both at site and both at head office level. And of course, this is where the performance will be measured. All right. And so different things happen at different levels. All right. And essentially, one has to look at what's happening on the control level. You have to plan that. You have to put projects, identify savings through operations, take that to a board level, and motivate somewhere that, you know, I need this 20 million or 30 million to implement a project. So you can see with the previous slide, all this is like quite systematic, all right? And if you don't have those systems in place, it becomes very difficult to manage and also to gauge performance. And in the world of energy management, you know, people will have heard there's energy audits, there's utility audits, there's measurement and verification. There's a whole lot of things, but where do they fit in? From the slides that I've presented at the front end just before this, is how do you take all this and all the information and map it into the systems, the higher level systems? So that's what this presentation looks at today. All right. Now, what I've just said is in a nice quick slide here, is if you look at any entity, all right, this is a generic slide. It basically says, you know, down at operations, you might have standby, renewable equipment. We collect that data in an energy management system or building management system. And we collect that information up at a higher level. So you can see here, this is individual equipment, individual buildings. Those buildings could be on a particular site. And then that's all connected together with a local area network at an industrial level. And then you pull all that information, and somewhere in finance or in engineering, people are looking at the bottom line. You know, what is the billing? What is the revenue? And of course, you have to manage all these assets, and you have to have a system to do that. So this here is what I call utility management. All right, so you're going to look at your supply, and you're going to look at your usage, and of course you're going to try and optimize those two to get the best bang for your buck. tariff do I operate on? Why? If I'm going to put renewables, what's going to offer me the best return of investment, and so on. And of course, then you come to your enterprise level where, of course, people will look at reporting performance. So you'll look for your key performance indicators. Each site or manager downstream will be given performance indicators, and that will be reported to on a higher level. And of course, that's done across your wide area network. So if you've got companies throughout South Africa, they're going to communicate over the internet. If they're local sites, then they'll talk about their local area networks. And of course, you have to make sure that the information exchange across here is secure. So you normally have a big fight with your IT department who want to control information and stop bugs going on. I saw a tender the other day for Transnet here in Durban, which got hit by a bug. If you remember, it was in the news a couple of months back, and it took down their whole metering system for the ports, the pipelines, and whatever. So it's not a willy-nilly thing. These things happen, and of course you have to take care of it. So what I'm going to do now is to provide a sort of how do we take all this information and take it and drill it upwards. And one of the things about these standards and quality management is they have this common thread which runs through all of them, which is your sort of like design cycle. You know, you start with something, you refine it, it's a circular system. And some are applied at project level, some are applied at systems level, and some are applied at enterprise level. But they actually all follow the same process. Maybe different levels, but exactly the same process, which is what Kishan, his business sells, is talking about standards. And that's what a standard does, is it standardizes the collection of information and the meaning of that information. All right, so at a system level, all right, this is a typical energy management cycle. You acquire data, smart meters. It makes no difference what business you're in. If you're going to collect information from your machines, or you're going to collect them from your distribution boards, there has to be some form of meter where you collect that information, whether it be steam, pressure, electricity, or so on. So that's the first aspect of it. Then the second is that, you know, you're going to do process optimization. You're going to look at an energy audit, an energy balance, and baseline energy model. So, you know, you've got this metering, you collect your data, all right? Then you've got to say, well, okay, I've got this data, what do I do with it? So you do an audit and you say, right, this machine or this factory or this section, it conducts or it utilizes its energy in a particular fashion. And that's where this baseline energy modeling comes in, as you say, well, okay, I'm using this 24/7 or during the day. How is this energy that I audited, how is it used during the day, and how does that impact on the tariff and our operations, and how do we do our operations according to the tariff to, you know, get the best bang of the buck. And then there's the energy balance. You want to make sure that the energy coming in from the municipality and your renewable energy and all your stuff like that actually all sums up. And it's very interesting when you go to businesses. They have distribution boards all over the place and no one has an idea of what's going on, and cables run all over the place. And in many cases, it's quite chaotic. And, you know, then once you've looked at your process optimization, it's your actual optimization. So you want to develop solutions, you want to manage it, and you want interventions. You want to track it. If there's a fault, if it's going off stream, what do you do? And then the fourth leg is track and monitor. So, you've got reporting. What is our production levels today? What did we push out? How did that measure with our performance for the year, or whatever it is? And, all that's recorded in an energy information system. So there's these very simple cyclic levels which you have to go through, but there's a whole lot of activities involved. And the point is where do all these things fit in? A slide is quite obvious, but it's not obvious how you actually do that. So what I've done here, this slide might be a bit busy, and I'll go through it individually. But if you have a look here, that slide that I've just put down is encapsulated right inside this slide here. All right, so in yellow here, you get an energy database. All right, so this data that we talked about, you'll take your real-time information from metering and sub-metering. Doesn't have to be electricity metering, but metering of your process. And you will take your historical usage information, billing, sub-billing, and you'll put that all into an energy database. All right, and you'll look at your energy supply tariff and rate analysis. So you want to make sure that you're procuring energy at the most optimum for your process. So is your process 24/7? Is it just daily, like commercial, and not much off-peak usage during the weekends? And then, of course, you take all this information here and you do benchmarking. All right, so you're going to have to say, well, I've got this particular machine or machines, and I've got all this information. How do I compare these? All right, and this benchmarking thing, whether it's at a machine level or at a systems level, is a key aspect. So here you will look at your buildings, facilities, energy audits. This might be your packaging and so on. And you'll have an energy management committee which sits around here. And you'll come up with an energy plan. And you'll have a demand side plan, which is your usage of electricity. And you'll have a supply side plan, which is, how do I put myself onto the most optimum tariff? I've got PV, I've got the electricity usage, I've got diesel. How do I operate these, all right, to get the best bang for the buck? And then, of course, once you've got these, you start identifying projects. You're going to have to get money to implement any of these, and most of you will have some internal rate of return. So you've got to be able to somehow, you've got a limited budget and infinite amount of projects. So which ones do you fund, and which are going to affect the best savings? And of course, once you implement these projects, they will feed into your demand, energy, and financial savings. So you'll be able to say, well, okay, I identified a particular issue. I made an action plan. I got this funded, I implemented, and people are now going to say, well, okay, is it achieving? So you're going to measure and verify. You're going to measure these and verify and come back to management and say, yes, all this money that you invested achieved this. And somewhere along the line, somebody's going to say, well, these savings here, how did they achieve? Or how were they achieved compared to our competitor or someone else? So, you can achieve something and you can achieve savings, but relative to what? So the whole benchmarking is key to this. And of course, at the end of the day, all these things here produce revenue. All right. And as you say, at an enterprise level, you're going to report that. So you're going to create your dashboards and report on your energy savings, whatever they are. And so you can see that, you've got this messy diagram, you've got all these standards and all this type of stuff. And it's really all encapsulated in here. And the question is well, you know, what fits into what? This isn't an obvious system. It took quite a few years of experience in energy management to do this slide. So this doesn't just come naturally to anybody. So if we take that same slide, all right, in actual fact, what happened is I went through the slide without going to the next slide. So this basically ends up repeating that. So this just basically shows you all the input side. All right, it's just what I've spent explaining. Now I'm just going through it more systematically. There's your, so once you've got all this information, you do your benchmarking, you look at your business, you come up with projects. So if you've got a solar plant, you've got, well, how do I procure that? I've got to take some energy and use it for my system, and I've got to sell it back into the municipality. So there's a demand side aspect and a supply side. You've got to go to your municipality for this, and this is your own. It's for internal consumption. So once you've done all that, you implement your projects. Once you've implemented your projects, then the rest of this comes into play. So all that stuff that I mentioned in the previous slide, this is systematically how you go through that. So hopefully it's helped pull that together a bit. Then that process that I've just explained, this is typically what might be more familiar to each one of you, is that at that level of the benchmarking, all right, you're going to develop an action plan. You're going to have to come to management and say, well, I've got these 10 different projects, and we now have to motivate and prioritize them. So, you know, there's a chiller replacement, there's LED lighting, solar, wind, rainwater. There's a whole lot of things that you can do. And you're going to have to look at each one of these and systematically identify and prioritize it. All right, so, and there's a methodology for this. The same process, the cyclic process, as I've shown in that slide, there's a cyclic process. You start from an analysis, you go to your benchmarking, you do your action plans, you implement projects, and that's implemented here. So, you know, you've got your project planning cycle, and many of you will understand the old plan, do, and checked, and act. All right, so you plan, you do, you check, and you act. So there's a general 7-step process where you say, right, we make a commitment towards a particular project, you assess the performance, you set the goals, you create an action plan, you implement it, you evaluate the process, and you recognize the achievements. So you can see here that this is a cyclic process. And it doesn't matter whether it's energy management systems, quality management, or whatever it is, they all follow this particular cycle, whether it's designing, school, projects, etc. So this is generic, but how it gets applied and implemented at different levels may be different. So where you've got to distinguish process from actual implementation. All right, and then of course, once you've got all this, you might have 10, 20, 30 of these at an individual project level. It's then to say, well, I've got 20 or 30 or 40 of these. How do we manage them? And that's where the quality management comes in. You know, so and it's generic. It's like saying, well, we've got these inputs, we've got these projects. Each of one of them has got activities. There's a starting end point. There's outputs. There's downstream processes, and it's a cyclic process in itself. All right. So you're going to have to ensure that you manage these 20 or 30 projects, whatever they are, and ensure that there's a consistent methodology applied to each one of them to ensure consistent outcomes for each particular project. So as you can see, they're more high level energy management. The nuts and bolts are important, but if you don't manage and collect all that particular information and know how to use it, it's not going to be very useful. You'll just have piecemeal energy management. Someone will do something and it'll eventually die. So, as I said, that's where the quality management aspect comes in. So, you've got your plan, do, check, act. If you look at the previous slide, plan, do, check, back. So it doesn't matter whether it's quality management or a system level application, they all follow this particular cycle. And it doesn't matter whether you're a technician on the floor at operations or management or middle management, this particular process applies to all. And there's someone most probably in your organization who has been tasked to look after this particular aspect and make sure that it's all consistently applied across the organization. And so everybody has the same form to fill in, and there's not 200 different forms, and that's just an example. So you can see here there's support and operations, performance evaluation, improvements, planning, and all of this cycles around leadership, which is, which I hope that as I'm talking, it's coming across from sort of gobbledygook in the beginning to more systematic application of how you do your energy management. Is this the point at which you take over?
Yeah, I can just talk through the next couple of slides because we're almost at the tail end of it now. Thanks, Greg. So I think I'm absolutely certain that the companies that the audience in this webinar represents are already very much mature into energy management. I think what Greg has placed before us here is a structure to how it's done and how best to ensure sustainability of the activity. So I think there's always an opportunity for refinement and further improvement. And I think Greg is the go-to person if you need any sort of advice on how to become more structured in your approach and more sustainable in the approach, and how to be more integrated. Because, these things, energy or resource management, it's not only energy. If you take a broader look at this, resource management happens in various aspects of functional areas of the business, but the idea is to knit it all together and to be able to report on it. So I'm just put the slide back on here that Greg has put on about 6 or 8 slides ago. And you will notice as Greg is placing these standards over them, when we talk about a quality management system, what we're actually talking about there is ISO 9001. And everybody knows it, so I don't need to talk about it. When we talk about the environmental management system, it's ISO 14001. Then we talk about a health and safety management system, that's ISO 45001. Then here is where we're focusing on today. Greg's talking about ISO 50001. We've not used this term today. Greg has not mentioned it. But I thought it apt to just demonstrate that when we start talking about an energy management system, technically speaking, we are talking about an ISO 50001 system. So everything that Greg has demonstrated structure to is in actual fact, I would say it is what is underpinning the ISO 50001 requirements. The same plan, do, check, act, the same leadership commitment and all of that is embedded in ISO 50001. And then if you talk about the food safety management system, which is quite a strong emphasis in packaging, then it's the FSSC 22001 or BRC systems. The information and security management system is probably a new concept. No, it's not a new concept. It is it is a crux of any business. The modern business, by the way, is based on digital and data, digital systems and data. So it then follows that data integrity is a given. It is now incumbent upon any business that is trying to work with European countries. It's now one of the prerequisites is ISO 27001, which demonstrates your commitment to information security. And if you put all of these ISO systems together, we talk about really a very good compliance management system, which is what Greg has got in the middle there, IMS, Integrated Management System. Greg, the next slide, please. Oh, I think if you just press it, yeah. So I just want to focus on ISO 50001 and the management system. So initially, just as you would with any one of the systems, 1445, 9000 or whatever, with 50001, you got to have an overarching energy policy. You have an energy planning system. And then again, as Greg keeps repeating, what he's talking about is the PDCA cycle, Deming's Plan, Do, Check, Act. Again, it is the operations, that is where you're doing it, and then you're controlling it, where you are you're doing, you're checking, and then you're acting on, you're checking through measurement, monitoring, and analysis, which is on the right-hand side. And then when you detect discrepancies or deviations from the plan, then you regard that as a non-conformity, in which case you immediately embark on what is known as a risk-based preventive action. So this is all I would say it's the same tenets that you find in 9,000, 45,000, and 14,000 coming through in 50,001. Again, you conduct internal auditing of the system, energy management system, and that in itself is an opportunity for continual improvement. On the left-hand side, you've got the management review, which takes into consideration the entire system, looks at each critical aspect of the system, and it reviews it in a formal management review process. And of course, the purpose of the management review is to determine what management interventions are required. If the system is working well, then fine, let it run. But if we find that there are elements that need focus, then what are the management interventions? What are the further resources that is required? Have we identified it, and how can we then bring it into reality so that we can sustain the energy management system, which is ISO. Next slide, Greg.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, the next slide.
Yeah, I've just got to. Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, the ultimate purpose of this here, you may or may not want to have it certified. Just remember, it's the same with any of the systems, 9,000, 14, 45, even 40, even 50,000. I know of many companies that we put the systems into, but they're not necessarily certified by a third-party certification body. Because you can achieve the beauty of the system without the certification. But the certification is just basically the cherry on top of the cake. It's telling anybody else, listen, these guys are certified by independent authority, and therefore it carries a bit of weight. The next slide, Greg. Yeah, so what is the benefits of becoming ISO 50001 certification? Of course, as Greg has repeatedly indicated, it will reduce your energy costs. It will improve organizational performance, even people performance. It's an amazing thing how when an organization is proactive and effective in its process management, how the camaraderie amongst people become positive. And there's this sense of employee engagement, which is literally immeasurable, what it does for the business from a soft factor point of view. And of course, increase in productivity and efficiency, that goes without saying. And then on the right-hand side, it demonstrates your commitment to greenhouse gas emissions, which means that you as a business are telling everybody that, listen, we are abiding by what is known as a triple bottom line. Typically, since the Industrial Revolution 1, our businesses and brands have been measured only on one bottom line, and that's a financial equity. But the question is, what about your social equity? What about your environmental equity? You should have a balance sheet for environmental equity. You should have a balance sheet for social equity. And if you do that, and not just a balance sheet for financial equity, you're demonstrating what is known as a triple bottom line approach. And this is something that is crucial to the modern business in the modern world. That goes without saying, you'll improve reputation, not here in South Africa only, but also across the globe, which then fosters your global standpoint. Remember, we have to look at the world. The world is growing really small with every 10 years. So your marketplace is no longer just South Africa. It's definitely a global marketplace. And then, of course, you boost your customer satisfaction. ISO 50001 may be a new concept. I looked just before this morning, I tried to find out how many companies in the world are certified. You'll be amazed. I didn't get the answer. There's so few. I even went into the ISO website, ISO in Geneva website, and there isn't a clear answer to the question. So I'm guessing it's just a couple of hundred companies across the world. It is a new ground. It's pioneering new ground. It's worthy of attention. Next slide. I think I'm done, Greg.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think, Vanessa, we're at the point where you can check if there's anything in the chat box. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Greg, and thank you, Kishan. I think we've gone through a very systematic approach to making sure that energy management is something that becomes managed in our businesses, so that it can be sustainable, so that it can deliver, as Kishan said, on the bottom line, triple bottom line, and gives us, I think this was sort of ideas of a practical implementation approach, and looking at benchmarks, within our own companies, but perhaps also across the industry, if there's space to look for benchmarks. And that was some of what was in the pre-questionnaire survey that was sent out by Able Energy. We have some summary of those responses if we want to go into that, but I think let's first, there aren't any questions in the chat section. If anyone has something they'd like to raise or ask Greg while we're here, would you just raise your hand and we'll come to you, and unmute yourself, when we come to you to speak.
There must be a whole lot of questions, I'm sure. I see when I looked at the list, the participant list, there's quite a lot of technical people here, a lot of engineers and people that are actually running and managing energy in their respective plants. You can't let Greg off that easily, guys. Please. From Anton. Hi
there.
Yeah.
Sorry, as I discussed earlier, I'm still busy navigating through Zoom here, and my apologies for not raising my hand. But my question for Greg is, so as you rightfully said, that energy managers need to manage across a broad spectrum and develop the necessary key performance indicators into managing and demonstrating responsibility with regard to energy. Now, I've got a problem statement here for you, and I'm directing this directly at your business, whereby I have multiple sites, or managing multiple sites within South Africa. And within these multiple sites in South Africa, I've got multiple metering or sub-metering devices that log information onto a certain database. But the consistency in the software is a challenge for me. Will your energy solution be able to consolidate this into a centralized enterprise?
Yes, look, what you're saying is a common problem with most businesses. So if you're going across the board, countrywide, like you're saying, then you have to have a consistency in metering, in the platform, in the database, and many of the solutions out there, and most probably you found, they try and tailor the meters and its software to themselves, so that once you basically go with these guys, you're stuck with them. So that's where we come in. I've got many years of experience in metering. And you can go out, there's systems available locally, very good systems. You don't have to go and buy these expensive Schneider systems and all this type of stuff. But you have to sit down and think, you know, if I'm going to put metering and if I'm going to put sub-metering, how do I get those things to communicate? How do I get all that information from your distribution board or your machine back into a single point on the LAN? How do I get all that information back to the server? And once I've got the information in the server, you know, what can I do with it? And there's a fantastic amount of software like Node-RED, like Grafana, which you've most probably never even heard about, which can do a whole lot of analysis and alarming and eventing, and it costs you virtually nothing. So you don't have to go and pay millions, but you have to get the data into a database and make sure that that's reliable. And once you've got it from there, there are a wide variety of tools to do that. So, you know, part of your problem, as I understand it, is getting these things to talk to one another and then getting the information out of it and trying to make sense of the information. Am I correct?
That is 100% correct. So it's about the extraction of data, sharing it across networks, as well as developing the necessary dashboards that make sense from an equity and an engineering perspective.
Yeah. So in other words, you need software tools which will allow you to do that. And much of the software says, okay, you can write a report. Pay me a couple of $1,000 or 10,000 Rand and I'll develop a report for you. So you need some flexibility from your side to be able to say, you know, this is what I want, and do I have tools which allow me to do it? Because when you start talking to someone else to develop something for you, that's where it starts to become problematic. So I think that's where people like myself and so on have experience in being able to say, well, okay, what is it you want? Where's the information? What format is it? And you can develop your own reporting tools or look at reporting tools around the place. There's plenty of them, and implement them to do what you want, and without costing an arm and a leg.
Yeah. So in other words, if I get if I arrange the metering devices such that you download it on CSV files and transfer that data on a software that you are probably proposing, you wouldn't be able to manipulate the data into some factual and reasonable elements.
Yes, and I mean, you know, metering itself has changed. So if you're talking 5-6 years ago, you know, meters were just, they call them smart, but they're as dumb as anything. You can have information on the meter, and now you've got to buy a system to collect the information. All right. The modern meters today, they will come with a secure FTP server on it, and it will post your CSV file to your server. So it'll take the data from your system and it'll send it up automatically. You don't have to buy an energy management system, or sorry, a metering system, automatic meter reading system to do that. So it cuts a whole lot of stuff out of the loop. So I don't know, look, people aren't familiar with metering, but for example, a vast majority of the electrical meters in South Africa are based on modems which are 3G. And many of you don't know that in 2 or 3 years' time, 3G is going to go off. So the question is what's everybody going to be able to do with their meters and modems in a few years' time? They're just going to vanish. So, you know, if you start getting into metering and cellular networks, many of you don't understand that, you know, your SIM that you've got, you can talk out, but you can't talk in. And so you have to have meters with client-side servers to talk to your server and collect the information. So you have to tunnel through the network. These might sound like all boring and whatever, but they have a major impact if you don't know what it is that you're doing. So if you want, there are meters which can take your CSV file from your meter, push that up onto your server and update it. Absolutely no problem. But the point is you have to sit down and think about that. You can't take meters from 5 years ago or 10 years ago and now try and apply those things, because it just entails massive expense to do that. Does that help?
Sure. Thank you very much, Craig. My last question for you. You mentioned a very imperative aspect, or shall I say an oversight for PV systems, especially within the case within a urban area, whereby you have reverse feedback into the grid that has severe anomalies to the entire network. You mentioned instruments and protection devices to mitigate or eliminate that kind of occurrence. What were you referring to?
Okay, so what happens at a municipal level is when they've got a substation, an upstream substation, they have a feeder, and that feeder might go down and feed 20 clients, all right? And they've got what they call a ring system. So they basically say, well, at the substation, I've got 10 clients. After the 9th client, I've got 8, and then I've got 7, and so on. And so you have this graded protection, all right? And it normally detects the power flow down the feeder, all right? And it can't detect power coming back up the feeder. So what is happening is when it's during the business day, during the day, and everybody's heavily loaded, your net power flows from substation to load. During the weekends and low loads, you now start pushing power down, okay? And it starts going backwards. So your protection in that starts to trip. It's as simple as that. And the problem is there's many of these PV installers. They can install anything, but they've got absolutely, you know, they accredited with SAPVIA, you know, the South African Photovoltaic Association. There's no professional engineers involved with protection settings and stuff like that. So you'll find now, when you do your PV project, you should have registered that with the municipality. There's a form that you fill in, and then the municipality actually conducts a study on your behalf, and it will address these particular issues. But what is happening is guys are just going down, adding it on and not even telling anybody. And that's happening with a lot of houses and stuff like that. And so, for example, when load shedding happens, you have to island your system. You have to take care of the earths and the neutrals. And some of the inverters just aren't designed to actually even do that. So there's a lot of systems which are going out which are non-compliant in that regard. So, you know, if you're not familiar with electrical protection, you know, like a transformer, for example, has what's called differential protection. So its protection is designed to only trip if something inside the transformer happens, not outside the transformer. And if you've got a substation which connects to a transmission line, they normally have what is called distance protection. Right? They don't, and that distance protection can look backwards in the substation. And if you get power flows in the incorrect direction, it'll trip the system. It'll register a fault. So maybe the things that I'm mentioning to you, you're either aware of or not even aware of. But when people are putting in their PV systems, you really have to look at all these issues, which a lot of these system integrators, or not system integrators, these installers, PV installers, don't have a clue.
Greg, just a very simple question from me, but I think all of us pay our electricity bills, even households and businesses, but we pay it on the premise that the meter, coming back to meters, that the meter is actually reading correctly. I mean, my meter I know is over 70 years old. What are the chances that it may be reading incorrectly in my disfavor? I mean, is there a chance that I could put another meter, some double check it, calibrate it, or anything of that sort?
Yes, many of the meters are the old analog meters. It's quite interesting because eThekwini did a study, and they replaced all their old analog meters, the one with the disc that you sort of see on your house and stuff like that. And they put new ones in, and people's electricity went up because the meters were far more accurate. And being there over 70 years, every meter should be calibrated every 10 years or so. It's under the Electricity Act and all that type of stuff. But people just don't get around to doing it. So yes, there can be inaccuracies. I had a client down the road here who got a 3 million rand bill because the fuses on two phases, or one phase of his 3-phase meter blew. So it wasn't registering on the meter. They were using the electricity, but the fuse of the meter had blown. And so, whose responsibility is it to check? Because you can't get into their systems, they lock them. And the question is as well, why didn't they run these checks if they read the meter? But many of you who have, if you're on time of use, if you're a bulk user, then you get an electricity bill every month and it's consistent. If you're not on a bulk tariff, you might get your meter read every 6 months, every year. You don't know how your electricity consumption's done. So yeah, it is problematic, and that's why we say for large consumers they should put check meters on. Get their own meter, put it on, and run a check. The guy got the 3 million rand bill was too schnook to get us to do a study for him, and he paid for it. So he wasn't willing to pay 20 or 25,000 rand for our services, but when he got the 3 million rand bill, he was running up and down and all over the place. So some of these things in hindsight are like preventative. I know, for example, the person who just spoke now about putting metering in and all over the place is one of the very few. Generally now, when you come to energy management, people in production, when you build a facility, CapEx isn't a problem. To put in a 5,000 rand meter for a 30 million, 40 million rand project, it sort of gets swallowed up as a small change. But the engineers who are now in operations, when they come and say, oh, I need 20 meters to measure around the place, how much is that going to cost? Oh, 200,000 rand. No. There's no return on investment. It's a waste of time. So you have to change that type of mentality, because people will lose money. And Kosanati's listen, and he'll back me up. We've been to clients where we show them we can save them 100,000 rand a month. And we found that out, and we do a shared savings over a year or more. No, they'll rather lose than share. So they'll lose 100%, but they won't share 50% for a year, and then we're out the picture. So there's like a culture and a mentality out there which is very difficult and illogical to understand.
Are there any other questions, guys?
Check through. I don't see any other hands and nothing else on the chat forum. Mlamli, I see your hands up. Do you want to go ahead.
Yes, no, thank you very much, Vanessa. Thanks, Greg. I just wanted to ask, I mean, if we want to reach out, I mean, I think some of our plants have got these smart meters, and we've got the dual meters where you've got a municipal meter, and we've got our own where we're checking. But if we want to maybe reach out to Greg and Kosinati, can we do that directly, or do we do it maybe through IPSA?
Yeah, you can. Oh, sorry, Greg. I was just going to say you can reach out directly, and we can also put you in touch, Mlamli. So yeah, if you give me that request, and then I'll put you directly in touch with Nkosinati and Greg. Sorry, Greg, you carry on.
Yeah, no, that's our sort of bread and butter stuff. And for example, you're going to get people now who are moving into photovoltaics. We want to put a 1 megawatt plant or a 2 megawatt plant or 500 kilowatts. Okay, well, what was your energy consumption over the last year, and what was the seasonal variation between winter and summer? So with energy management, if you in heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, HVAC, and solar, they opposite. So in heating, you design your chiller plant for the hottest day in summer. For PV, you design your PV for the worst day in winter. All right, because it has to produce that output regardless. So it's stupid little things like that. And when you go to a client and say, well, we need your last year's, we need a seasonal variation. We need to see, you can go on the web and you can find out the solar radiation for the past 5 years, 10 years, or whatever. Okay, that's fine. And you can get an estimate of what power you can generate. But now, how do you match that to your system? So if you for example, on a business in general, you get your bill every 6 months. 6 months, it's estimated, you get this bill and a big reconciliation. Customers just don't even know how to move to a new tariff because they need the information. So yes, that's the type of stuff we do. We bring a bit of experience and common sense to the place.
I think I should just reiterate, anybody that needs the services of Able Energy, Nkosinati and his team, including Greg, you're most welcome to talk directly. IPSA is not your go-to person. We have just facilitated the webinar. It's a value add demonstration to our members, but you're most welcome to talk to them directly. I think, Vanessa, if there's no more questions, we can close the session down.
Yes, yeah, agreed. I don't see anything further. So thank you. As we said, we recorded the session. I think I said that up front. So if anybody needs a copy of that recording and wants that, please just drop me an email and we'll get that across to you. But thank you again. Thank you so much to Nkosinati for bringing this initiative forward, and to Greg for sharing your great insight, and Kishan. And thank you to you all for just spending this time listening through with us.
I don't know, Bill, whether you want to just close up since Bill's here with us.
Yeah, Kishan, thanks a lot. And thanks to the people from Able Energy for sharing with us. And to the team that put it together, I would just sit and watch from the sidelines. I know it was a lot of work sort of coordinating it. Some heavy going for me, I must admit, in this presentation, but I'm sure most of the people got a lot out of it. And we look forward to future skills development and knowledge sharing coming from the education team at IPSA with Kishan and Vanessa. So thanks all for participating, and thanks for those who gave us the content. Much appreciated.
Cool, thanks, Paul. Yeah, let's close, Vanessa. Right. Bye, guys. Bye. If there's any questions, you could contact us or contact Able Energy directly. But thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Kishan, when everybody's gone, can you just?
Yeah, I thought we should just, Vanessa, if, Bull, maybe you want to just stay around. I see Nkosnati has gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, Greg, thanks for that insightful discussion. I've heard you before, so I kind of knew what was coming.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just waiting for everybody to go.
Yeah.
No, Kishan, you were just testing to see if I was still on board, eh?
No, I saw you.
You were testing me to see if I was paying attention. Eh? You didn't catch me out. All I'm glad is, Greg, I'm just glad there's no exam or test after this session. I cannot tell a lie. I got lost a few times. But I'm sure the people who stayed with us all afternoon, they must have, well, during the session, they must have got a lot out of it, because it sounded like there was good content that was meaningful to people dealing with the issues that you picked up, that you talked about.
Yeah, in actual fact, Kishan, you remember you sent me your file.
Yeah.
There was one slide in mine that I had developed, which gave far more explanation. It was missing. That's why I ended up so quickly.
But I didn't take any slides out. Let's just check this original.
No, I had it developed, and I don't know what happened to it.
Yeah. I think it's everybody does energy management, but I think the simple thing of checking that the meter reading is actually correct. Even I haven't done it in my own home, and I can tell you, by the way, when you started to talk about this one.
Yeah, you see, here I had a slide which showed what the different aspects of energy audits, utility audits, measurement, how it all applied. And when I went to the slide, it was missing. But it's not a problem.
I think you covered it.
I've done enough lectures to be caught off guard, so just carried on. But it was just the sort of cherry on the on cake.
Yeah. No, good. Vanessa, any comments from you? Any learnings?
I don't know. It seemed quite quiet, but I think it's, in terms of questions and in terms of gauging people's response and reactions, but I think it's quite a systematic discussion, and it's probably not something that's that easy to get a lot of engagement over a webinar. So I think, that's the learning, and it's quite difficult to stimulate questions. I was trying to think of how one can kind of stimulate those, but it's sort of almost so much information. It's such a big thing that you need to just go into it slowly, take the feed, like that Lamley saying, and Trisha, they had key issues, things that are impacting in their business, and they now see an opportunity to take this forward and get more information from you, Greg. I think that
That's why
sorry, Greg, you go. No, you go.
That's why I thought keeping it at a higher level. Because if the devil is in the detail, and in a webinar like this, you can't go on. But what we can do is to say to people, we did this high level issue. Are there more detailed things or other aspects that you want another webinar on? And you can do that.
Yeah, look, that guy Trishan, who you see, Vanessa, I hear what you're saying, but let me tell you, those chaps that understand Greg, like a fellow like Tushen. By the way, Tushen's a government ticket guy, and he is responsible nationally for all Hurt and Carter plants. So he's ultimately responsible, reporting to Adam, the CEO. Quite a high-level guy, and rest assured he'll come to you, Greg, with some query. But you see, a fellow like that will latch onto what Greg is saying. For him, the language it's easy. And so most of these guys, they would have known exactly what Greg was talking about, although for me, it was a bit over my head. But yeah, I think, Vanessa, the right people will approach at the right time. I think from an IPSA point of view, we have just created value. We've offered value. And from here onwards, I mean, we can just feed any comments.
In the energy game, we found out, like with the Durban Chamber, there's two different groups of energy. There's the environmental people, okay, and then there's the energy people, and they're not the same. So, for example, DeFi went and did a massive project, but they did it from an environmental branding point of view.
Okay.
Right. And in actual fact, their savings were really, really small. I mean, you can use percentages to make anything look good, but if you looked at the physical savings that they were talking about, they were actually quite small. But to them, it was an important thing. It was done to the brand and all that type of stuff. So there's different people driving different aspects. So when you talk about a just energy transition, the people you're talking to in an organization, are they on